Today, Gaming America is sitting down with Scott Vanderwel, CEO of PointsBet Canada, on the eve of its debut in the Canadian market to talk about the many opportunities that are arising there and what his company can do to take advantage of the situation. Mr. Vanderwel, thank you very much for sitting down with us.
Cameron, thanks for having me.
Sure. My first question is, I suppose, more of a personal one, but can you tell me about your career thus far and how has your path in the gaming industry led you to this leadership role at PointsBet Canada?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the chance to tell a little bit of the PointsBet story. As it relates to my personal story, I spent about 15 years as a strategy consultant working for a large global company called Monitor, which was later acquired by Deloitte, and then spent 10 years working for one of Canada's largest telecommunications companies and sports media companies, Rogers Communications. Following Rogers, I was chasing an opportunity to work for a more entrepreneurial space. I had my eye on this particular industry as it was a fast-growing and soon-to-be legal space. And so through a series of conversations, found myself fortuitously in a position where I had an opportunity to play a role in this industry and its formation, but more specifically in PointsBet and the opportunity to lead PointsBet in this country.
Sure. My next question is about Ontario, which I know on April 4th, it's going live with single event sports betting and iGaming. PointsBet Canada is one of the first operators to receive a license in Ontario. I was wondering if you could please speak a bit about the application process and how difficult is it to get a license in Ontario?
Well, I think what I would say is that the government, the AGCO, and IGO have been doing a really good job of bringing companies through the licensing process. We have really felt like there's been a constructive, open dialogue and great partnership throughout the entire process. But it is also the case, given how quickly this country has moved from changing the laws to wanting to be open, that there's a little bit of building the bike and riding the bike at the same time. And there are some aspects of the Canadian legal framework that are being tested for the first time inside of the Ontario framework around conduct and manage, which add a layer of complexity to what the regulator needs to put in place to ensure that they're putting a proper framework that is both sets up for a good competitive environment, but also protects their accountabilities to ensure that this category is well governed, that Canadians have an opportunity to play and entertain themselves in this space in a safe way, and that it's consistent with the standards that they've held others playing in the gaming space too over time. So I would say that we're very excited about being one of the first operators to receive a license. It comes on the back of months of I would say very close collaboration with the regulator, and I expect us to maintain that relationship and that ability to collaborate going forward, because this is still an industry that from a legal perspective is quite nascent in this country. It'll only kind of get its first starting footsteps in April, and there'll be a lot of places where we need to continue to kind of look at and improve the model for Canadians and for competitors.
Sure. Being such a nascent industry and such a nascent legal framework, do you find that I know you're not a regulator, but you observe them, the regulators or companies such as yourself look to other markets where betting or iGaming is already live, such as in the US or further abroad?
100%. I mean, it's been a very good and constructive dialogue in that basis. Sometimes I know that the regulator has been scouring other markets for ways in which to handle certain situations. We've been fortunate in that we've been able to offer our opinion given the jurisdictions that we operate in, and provide examples of how you can achieve the objectives that the regulator has in certain aspects of the framework, just given that we operate in others. So if you think about anti-money laundering or KYC or any of those sort of player validation and registration components, those are all things that are well understood across jurisdictions. They have each jurisdiction has its own nuances, but usually for most challenges that exist through the regulatory process, there's some form of an example that can form a basis for establishing the framework. And it's been helpful that we've been asked to share our opinion along the way, and we felt that the regulator has taken that into consideration, and that the rules have come back in a way that certainly seem well thought through.
So you would say you're satisfied with the legal framework? I mean, are there aspects that you're not satisfied with, and do you see it maybe evolving after the market goes live?
Well, I think I worked in telecom long enough to know that the legal frameworks or the regulatory frameworks are always likely to evolve. The likelihood that we get it perfect out of the gate is you are always looking for opportunities to evolve the framework. Having said that, the places where the challenges have been greatest have just been around the relative immaturity of the industry. So if you were to, there are parts of the framework, for example, that relate to, the provisions and the visibility that the regulator needs with our bankers. But the banking industry is just at the edge of learning about this industry and considering it a legal industry. And so their internal teams of risk management and AML are still trying to figure out how they feel about this category. Insurance is another example where those adjacent and necessary supporting industries aren't necessarily haven't gone through their own process of understanding what it means to have a legal gaming industry in this country, and so they're a little bit behind as well. And so what we've found is that it's in those areas where we're having to rely on say a third-party provider or third-party support to bring the overall operating model together, where there's been most work to do in terms of education and building comfort across the stakeholders.
Sure. I'd like to move on a bit, if I could. My next question is sort of about the Canadian market as a whole. So Ontario is going live in April 4th. What are the next steps that you see for the Canadian market beyond Ontario?
Oh, so is the question, outside of Ontario jurisdictionally? Is that the question?
Yes, jurisdictionally.
Yeah. So look, what seems to be very clear is that all jurisdictions are looking to Ontario as a bit of a beacon market, and we'll use the lessons learned from Ontario either in the conversation we just had around how to set up the regulatory framework, or the early operating lessons that I'm sure will occur as tools for how they think about their frameworks. What is also true is that every jurisdiction in Canada has the same kind of prevailing strategic challenge, which is there's a lot of activity that exists in a single event sports wagering, which is not regulated and which exists in those jurisdictions. Canadians can bet on sports games today, or sports outcomes today. They just can't do it in a way that's safe and legal. And all jurisdictions have that challenge. And so all jurisdictions are going to need to find their way to a solution. Some at this point are a little bit more holding on to more of a centralized government-led approach. And other jurisdictions, I think, are seeing the benefits of an open market. We certainly believe that the best way to move Canadians into a legal framework is to give them the maximum amount of choice. And the best way to get the maximum amount of choice is to make the market as open and competitive as you possibly can. And that will put the best product and the best experiences into the market, and Canadians will find their way to a framework. And then it's up to the regulators and the governments to establish how they could, how they want to control and manage that environment.
Sure. And I assume you have full faith that the market will get more crowded in, say, the next year with operators.
Yeah, I mean, I think almost by definition it has to, right? Because the reality is that the operators who are currently serving Canadians today, they're not necessarily going anywhere. Many of them are looking for their pathway towards becoming legitimate operators. So I see them as being competitors that will, they'll have an evolution to their business model for sure, but I expect to see them continue to play in the marketplace. But then the fact that this market has a legal framework means that other players, legitimate players like PointsBet and some of our other international or U.S. Competition can look at this market through their governance models and say, yes, it's a fair place to compete. And so I'm fully expecting this to be a highly competitive market, certainly early on. I'm looking forward to that competition because I think it's going to bring the best out of all of us, and I certainly am comfortable with our ability to compete inside of that framework.
Well, what sort of strategies will you deploy to sort of stand above the competition?
I could tell you, but then no. The truth of the matter is I think we've been pretty open with what our strategy is. We are fortunate in that PointsBet's strategy has never been to go and try to be 30% of the market, be the mass solution for all people playing in this space. We've been fortunate to be a bit more choiceful about the segments we go after and the part of the market that we're most interested in. So we'll continue to do that, and we'll be able to attract Canadians to our platforms on a couple of different dimensions. One, we really believe in our product. We've made a lot of investment in having our technology exist in-house, which gives us just an awful lot of flexibility as it relates to serving the needs of Canadians. And so we expect our product to be tailored to this market. It'll be a little bit tailored at the time of launch, but I think you can imagine over the first 18 months, as we learn better what Canadians want and what they're interested in, that product, the pace of its tailoring will only accelerate, and it'll become more and more relevant to the Canadian player. We certainly have been investing in building a local presence, right? So for us, there are a lot of people that will just try to serve this market as another state or another jurisdiction. For us, that's not the way we chose it. We believe in building local teams because we believe that through having a local team, you can identify ways to connect to the sports fan more meaningfully, and we'll find those opportunities in the marketplace. And we've in doing that, we become part of the local narrative, and that's very much been a part of our story as well. We're trying to wrap ourselves in that local feeling and really represent the Canadian sporting experience, not just sort of an imported one. And then the last thing, of course, and it kind of goes without saying, but I should say it, is Canadians haven't had very much choice as it comes to playing in a safe, legal, reliable way. We, as will others, will bring that framework to the marketplace, but we intend to be the safest, the most compliant, the easiest, fastest, the best way to get your money in and out. Those things, we don't want people that win on our platform to spend 2 days trying to get their money back out and have uncertainty as to whether or not those winnings are theirs. We expect them to have those winnings as close to real time as is practical relative to the checks and balances we have to put in place. And that's going to be a new feeling for Canadians over time, or initially, and then over time, that'll be a bit more normalized. But it's certainly in the early days, I think that's going to stand out for people that are participating in this category.
Yeah, you'll let the quality sell itself, I suppose.
Well, we definitely believe at the end of the day, the people with the best product will be the ones standing. And
Mhm.
we believe we have one of the best products in the marketplace.
Sure. Now, PointsBet offers sports betting, but also iGaming. I was wondering, in your view, what is a higher priority in this market for you?
Well, make no mistake, we're a sports betting led organization, but we know that iGaming is a critical part of our strategy, and our early investments were on the sports book. We're making a significant amount of investment against the iGaming side of the portfolio, and in Ontario, we'll bring both to bear, right? So Canadians who are participating and entertaining themselves on our sports book will also be able to play our slots or our table games when they have moments that they want to do that, and we'll continue to round out that experience over time.
Mm-hmm. A little bit more about iGaming. I read last week that PointsBet Canada was eyeing Alberta as a location for iGaming research. Did I read that correctly?
A little bit, yeah. Certainly, we've done it. Maybe to be clear about what we've done in Alberta. So the context, and just in case someone is listening to this and doesn't have the full context, the Alberta government has taken steps towards the opening of their market and the legalization of their market. They have a multi-phase process. Phase one was basically making sure that it was available through their provincial lotteries. Phase two is extending the offering into their casino footprint and allowing them to extend their offerings into the gaming space. And then phase three is a more open, legal, regulated market that we assume will look a lot more like the Ontario opportunity. We're interested in phase three, but we are starting to put down the investments required in Alberta to be on the ground and ready in the same way that we've done in Ontario. And what we believe is a real opportunity in Alberta is they have a highly qualified, highly capable technical workforce that we believe can help us as we build a product, not just for Canada, but for our global audiences. And so that's the opportunity that we have been exploring with Invest Alberta, and one that we're excited to continue to talk about as it relates to Alberta. But it's all sort of predicated on the journey that Alberta is on towards a fully licensed, multiplayer, highly competitive marketplace, and our desire to be a player in that context.
Sure. Moving back to sports betting for a question, I wanted to ask, this is more about, less about PointsBet per se, and more about the markets, like the national market. So in the United States, you have these big events like March Madness and the Super Bowl. I was wondering, in the Canadian, because I mostly report on the United States, but so in the Canadian market, do you have is the schedule the same basically? So I know the sports are a little bit different, but they're also not different. I was wondering, what are the biggest events in the Canadian sports schedule, annual sports schedule?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is the Canadian sports fan, the research would tell you that the Canadian sports fan is a little less likely to be a fan of a given team and a little bit more likely to be a fan of sport, which means that Canadians, and perhaps it's a function of having some of our own homegrown leagues and teams, as well as having great access to the world-class teams and leagues that exist south of the border. We tend to follow a broad range of sport here in this country. Having said that, the big sports in this country, they look a lot like the big sports in the US, right? So football is an important sport here. The difference is we have our Canadian Football League, which is an augmentation to the NFL experience. And so we have highly relevant local teams with passionate local fans that, for example, are very supportive of their CFL franchises. Hockey is obviously, it's an important sport south of the border. It's a source of national pride north of the border, and so hockey, in any quantification of the market, hockey is way higher up on the map. And then we see, Canada is a multi-ethnic, multicultural environment, and so we see other sports that play to that showing up here, that in a way that maybe more reflects what you might see in the European experiences or some of those other jurisdictions. So soccer, cricket, rugby, they're all a little higher in the context of Canada. Curling is one that we've made a very specific and committed investment to. And we believe that's a sport that is, first of all, is a great gaming sport. I think it was second most watched sport in the Olympics for Canadians, and one of the most bet on over the course of the Olympic Games, and one that we intend to position ourselves very closely with, and have already started down that path. And even sports like alpine skiing and some of those other Nordic sports, they register a little higher here in Canada than they might in the U.S. Just given the environmental factors that impact Canada.
Sure. My last question, you can take it as you please, but where would you like to see PointsBet Canada in 18 months' time?
Where would I like to see PointsBet Canada in 18 months' time? Look, in 18 months' time, what I really hope is that when Canadians hear the words PointsBet Canada, they understand who we are, and they understand that the kind of product and service experience that they have there, and that it feels different. And if we do that, if we have a virality or a word of mouth that is supportive of the experience of the product that we can bring to the market, then I'll be really happy. Then I feel we will have done our job in educating Canadians as to what we can bring to bear. I'm excited about us growing our footprint. I'm hopeful that we'll be in multiple jurisdictions 18 months from now as they become available. I'm excited for us to be a voice in the emergence of this industry, and I think that this industry is only going to get more exciting in the next 18 months, not less. So there's a lot of things that go onto my list, but the number one thing is that the people who have experienced PointsBet Canada want to tell their friends about it.
Good luck in your endeavors. Scott Vanderwel, PointsBet Canada, thank you for sitting down with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Cameron.